work 60 hours every week. You show up early, consistently. You stay late. You say yes when everyone else says no. You follow every rule without exception. You sacrifice your personal time, your vital energy, and often your health for the job, for the team, for the vague promise of someday. You are deeply loyal. You are honest. You take genuine pride in doing things the right way. And yet, somehow, you are stuck, watching someone else rise faster, higher, living the life you were promised you'd earn. This person cuts corners. They talk more than they work. They know the right people. Crucially, they lack your skills and your discipline, and you are left in their dust, quietly asking yourself, what did I do wrong? But perhaps that is the entirely wrong question. Maybe the real question is, what lie have I been told? From childhood, you were systematically taught that hard work always leads to reward, that effort equals outcome, that if you just grind long enough, the system will eventually notice, recognize, and repay you. But what if that formula is fundamentally broken? Worse, what if it was never truly real to begin with? Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher who ruthlessly shattered comforting illusions and exposed the hidden architecture of human belief, once wrote that moral labor, the kind of work glorified precisely for its sacrifice, obedience, and humility, is not noble. It is, he argued, a form of spiritual slavery, a psychological trap designed not to uplift you, but specifically to keep you exactly where you are. Because here is the uncomfortable, necessary truth. In a world where power determines outcomes, morality is often strategically used to control those who have none. You were taught to believe that virtue is its own reward, that if you just kept your head down and stayed good, life would eventually be fair. But life is not fair. Life is intensely competitive. Life is political. And the system you serve does not reward virtue. It rewards value. And specifically, not the value you create, but the value you control. That is why the nurse pulling a 12-hour shift, saving lives, gets paid less than the influencer selling a get-rich-quick course on TikTok. That is why quietly, without reward, is somehow sacred. That virtue equals submission. He called this debilitating mindset slave morality, a belief system born not from strength or creation, but from weakness, resentment, and fear. And if you feel stuck today despite doing everything demonstrably right, you are not crazy. You are waking up. You are beginning to see that the world is not malfunctioning. It is functioning exactly as it was intentionally built to. The people who rise are not always the most skilled or the most selfless. They are simply the ones who understand power, how to navigate it, how to claim it, and how to entirely detach their personal worth from whether or not the system approves of their ambition. So ask yourself, what if working harder is not the answer? What if the belief in moral labor is not your salvation, but your cage? Because until you confront that devastating lie, you will keep grinding your gears while someone else rewrites the fundamental rules of the game. Let's take a closer, brutal look at the contradiction hiding in plain sight. If the hard work formula holds true, then why do the hardest working people in society so often struggle just to survive? Think about the quintessential examples. The construction workers who rise before the sun and labor until their backs ache. The nurses who pull grueling 12-hour shifts, racing between demanding patients, skipping necessary meals, sacrificing holidays. The delivery drivers, janitors, and bus operators. The indispensable people who physically keep the modern city alive and make the tangible world function. And yet, these are often the same people who live paycheck to paycheck, who constantly worry about the rent, who simply cannot afford to get sick. Meanwhile, someone filming superficial get-rich tips in a rented sports car on a social media platform is making more in a single day than that nurse earns in a month. You feel this inherent contradiction. You have seen this discrepancy. This is not a rare glitch in the system's programming. This is the system. Because while physical labor builds the actual world, physical labor does not control it. The people who earn the disproportionate amounts, the CEOs, the hedge fund managers, believe that this is simply unfair, that there has been some kind of terrible mistake. But again, this is not a malfunction. This is precisely how the game has been deliberately set up for centuries. Why? Because physical labor, no matter how honest or essential, can always be replaced, automated, outsourced, or devalued. But control over resources, control over people, control over the intellectual property, is profoundly scalable. The nurse can only treat one patient at a time. The powerful investor can move billions with a single click. And the system universally favors scale and leverage. This is where the lie of moral labor becomes especially cruel. We have been conditioned to believe that suffering is noble, that endurance is inherently honorable, that those who serve quietly and sacrifice without complaint are the moral backbone of society. And they are the moral backbone. But morality does not pay the bills. Praise does not build wealth. And sacrifice does not automatically translate into influence or power. While the working class is told to keep your head down and be grateful, those at the top are intensively trained in strategy, in law, in manipulation, in capital acquisition. They are taught not to serve but to manage, not to endure but to dominate. They learn the explicit rules, and then they immediately learn how to creatively rewrite them. So ask yourself, if moral labor is so righteous and so essential, why doesn't it come with power? Why are the most fundamentally indispensable workers also the most easily disposable? Why does society preach the value of hard work, then funnel the actual material rewards elsewhere? Nietzsche would assert that the moral system itself was specifically crafted by the powerful, not to liberate the masses, but to pacify them. It deliberately teaches obedience, not sovereignty, self-sacrifice, not self-assertion. It relentlessly glorifies submission, and then severely punishes those who dare to question the fundamental hierarchy. That is why the lie persists, because it is immensely profitable for those in charge. It keeps people striving, hoping, and working for a reward that rarely, if ever, comes. The promise of someday is the most effective chain ever forged. Therefore, is not truth. It is pure societal strategy. He drew a sharp, essential line between two completely competing moral systems: master morality and slave morality. Master morality is born from a position of inherent strength and self-affirmation. It celebrates ambition, boldness, creativity, and the unrestrained will to power, the drive to shape the world according to one's own vision. It does not wait for permission. It does not beg to be recognized. It declares its own value and truth. The person operating under master morality defines good by whatever enhances their power, their freedom, and their capacity to build and command. Strength is not viewed as a threat. It is an ultimate virtue. And virtue is whatever affirms life, power, and possibility. But slave morality is profoundly different. It is born from a position of weakness, resentment, and a lack of control. It emerges from those who cannot physically compete on the open battlefield of power, so they instinctively redefine the rules of the moral game. They assert that humility is superior to strength, that obedience is nobler than dominance, and that suffering is a sign of ultimate moral purity. In this inversion of values, the very qualities that once defined weakness, passivity, patience, subservience, are strategically reframed as virtues, because it is the only way the powerless can find dignity, meaning, and psychological comfort in a world they cannot hope to control. And here lies the ultimate trap. Once this moral code spreads through society, it becomes sacred, untouchable, and mandatory. It's no longer seen as a clever strategy for mere survival. It is taught as the absolute, undeniable truth of human existence. This is precisely how the doctrine of moral labor came to be praised. The pervasive idea that good people sacrifice, that honorable people serve, that virtue lies in simply doing your duty while expecting nothing in return. We collectively romanticize the worker who never complains, who always says yes, who puts the perceived needs of the corporation before their own health, without ever realizing the beautiful. It provides meaning to random pain. It allows people to endure immense unfairness without the terrifying necessity of confronting it. Slave morality survives not because it is true, but because it is a profoundly effective, collective sedative. But Nietzsche did not write to sedate. He wrote to awaken, to force us to confront the terrifying, exhilarating freedom that comes only when you stop waiting for external justice and bravely start creating your own terms of existence. If this system is so obviously rigged, so clearly designed to reward control over contribution, why do so many good people still believe in it? The answer is not just economic. It is deeply psychological. It starts early, long before your first paycheck. From childhood, we are conditioned to believe the world is fundamentally fair, that good things happen only to good people, that justice will inevitably prevail. Stories, cartoons, school lessons, they all repeat the same comforting false refrain. If you do what is right, you will be rewarded. Be honest, be kind, be diligent, and in the end, life will make sense. But this belief has a name: the just world fallacy, the psychological idea that the universe is inherently fair, that effort equals outcome, that what you give will always come back to you. It is a beautiful, powerful idea. It gives people hope and helps them psychologically make sense of arbitrary suffering. But it is not true, and clinging to it, especially within a system explicitly designed to reward power over principle, is not merely naive. It is dangerous. Because while you are working late, meticulously double-checking spreadsheets, and fixing operational problems you didn't create, someone else is learning how to play the board. While you are saying yes, being polite, and taking on the thankless extra shift, someone else is intentionally building alliances, studying the rules of leverage, and understanding exactly how to make the system work for them. You believe you are being moral. They are being strategic. And in this reality, strategy wins the highest rewards. That is why the essential engineer who keeps the servers running gets laid off, while the reputation advisor with political connections gets promoted. Understanding that if you keep showing up to a game with the wrong map, you will never reach the correct destination. The rules you were taught were designed to produce good workers, not powerful creators, because the people who taught them to you, the ones who benefit, they understood the game. They just needed reliable people to keep playing it. So, if the world is not fair, if virtue doesn't reliably lead to victory, then what does? How do you survive without becoming ruthless? How do you move forward without losing your soul? The answer is not to abandon morality. It is to stop worshiping it, to stop treating sacrifice like a strategy, to realize that good intentions are not a plan. In a world built on power, understanding power is part of being good, because conscious strength is necessary for moral action. Once you have seen the lie, that waiting to be rewarded for your obedience is a dead end, you do not throw away your morals. You redefine what strength looks like. This is the crucial mistake many make when they first wake up. They think the only alternative to being exploited is becoming heartless. But Nietzsche was not preaching cruelty. He was not telling you to abandon integrity. He was telling you to stop confusing your submission with virtue. His solution was not to destroy morality, but to overcome the morality of weakness, to become someone who doesn't just follow rules, but writes new ones. Someone who doesn't need external permission to live with purpose. In Nietzsche's concept, that person is the Übermensch, the overman. The Übermensch is not a tyrant or a villain, but a fully realized, sovereign individual, a creator of their own values. This is someone who willingly walks away from systems that no longer serve them and builds something better in their place. The Übermensch doesn't sit quietly, hoping to be seen. They define their own meaning. They don't wait to be promoted. They create impact on their own terms. They understand the system, but they are never enslaved by it. They know when to skillfully play the game and when to fundamentally change the board. They understand that power is not inherently evil. It is necessary. Not power over others, but power over yourself, your direction, and your destiny. You see these people in real life, the entrepreneur who walked that power in the first place. That shift, from waiting to creating, from submitting to owning, that is the path Nietzsche pointed toward. That is what it truly means to step out of the cage of moral labor. But here is the hard truth. Escaping that cage means letting go of something deeply comfortable. Your attachment to being seen as a perfectly good and compliant person. It means being willing to disappoint people who benefit directly from your silence. It means being willing to stand alone for a time while you build a new, stronger foundation. True strength is not about petty domination. It is about authorship, about writing a life that aligns with your deepest conscious values, not the docile values handed to you by a system designed to keep you small. This is not about becoming selfish. It is about becoming sovereign. So, what does action look like after the awakening? After you've seen through the illusion of moral labor, after you've stopped waiting for fairness, and after you've chosen not to abandon morality, but to reclaim your personal power, it starts with this critical understanding. Kindness is not weakness, but strategic kindness. That is strength. Too often people confuse being good with being passive. They think saying yes, avoiding all conflict, and putting others first automatically makes them virtuous. But Nietzsche would argue that morality without consciousness is simply obedience in disguise. The goal is not to become cold or manipulative. It is to become conscious, to learn how to move through the world with both a moral compass and a survival strategy. Strategic kindness means knowing when to genuinely help and when to wisely walk away. It means reading people and context, when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to firmly strike a boundary. It means you do not say yes to every request just to be liked. You say yes only when it aligns with your goals, your truth, and your strength. Because not every job deserves your loyalty. Not every leader deserves your unquestioning trust. Not every opportunity deserves your time. You must become the kind of person who knows precisely when a situation is no longer serving your team, genuinely meaning it. These are not betrayals of your morals. They are the necessary expressions of your maturity and self-respect. The truth is, If you don't learn how to play the power game consciously, you will always remain a pawn in it. But if you do learn, you don't have to lose your soul in the process. The key is to use power as a tool, not a trophy. Let your ethics guide your overall direction, but let strategy carry your daily decisions. Nietzsche put it simply: power is not evil, it is the will to become more. More than a servant, more than a cog, more than just the good, obedient employee. It is the will to become the author of your own worth. And you cannot do that if you treat morality as a cage. You have to treat it as a compass, one that points directly to your true north, not towards someone else's fickle approval. So no, do not throw away your principles. But yes, learn how the game is played. Understand leverage. Recognize exactly when you are being used and when you are truly being seen. Because the future doesn't belong to the obedient. It belongs to the clear, the conscious, the ones who strategically merge principle with power and empathy with a necessary edge. Not the ones who wait for the world to change, but the ones who learn to change the terms of their own existence. If you grew up believing that hard work is automatically enough, that if you just keep your head down, stay loyal, and do things the right way, life will reward you, then it is time to wake up. Not because hard work is worthless, but because hard work without power, without strategy, and without ownership will keep you permanently stuck. The real man doesn't just labor. He sees the system for what it is, he studies it, he understands it, and when the rules no longer serve him, he writes new ones. That is the profound difference between merely surviving and actively leading, between being a small cog in someone else's machine and becoming the bold architect of your own future. So, if you are tired of waiting, if you are done with the myth that sacrifice is enough, and if you are finally ready to think deeper, act smarter, and live on your own terms, this is where it begins.